My name is Jeff Perrault. I'm the Vice President of Resources and Compliance here at Perrault Farms. We're a multi-generational farm here in Toppenish, Washington. My grandfather started this specific farm here in Toppenish in 1968, growing hops in a small orchard. Prior to that, my great-grandfather grew hops up in the Moxie Valley. Hops and organic blueberries is what we grow.
Why do you think it's important to provide sexual harassment training to you and your employers here at Perrault?
As an employer, I think we're obligated to provide a safe working environment for our employees. And number two, there's a lot of liability in not ensuring that you're providing the training for employees.
Jeff, we've talked about the fact that sexual harassment training is just one strategy for really creating a healthy, safe work environment. And you've talked about how creating a better social environment is also a key, and you've shared some strategies with me. Can you talk a little bit about what you do overall to improve the social environment here at Perrault?
Absolutely. So every employee that we do hire here in Perrault Farms actually receives a 3-hour onboarding session with our human resource manager. In that training, we go through acceptable behaviors regarding harassment. In this training, we describe what's allowable, what is proper conduct at work. Something as simple as a supervisor referring to employees by nicknames can create problems. So we just don't allow that here at work. And respect is a big thing amongst employees, and the supervisor-employee relationship, it's imperative there has to be a mutual respect. Getting to know your employees is also very important. Knowing your employee by name and not just referring to people as, general. If you remember employees' names and actually get to know their strengths and weaknesses, it's gonna help your farm, and it helps you better your working relationship to some extent.
Could you share some tips with growers about the idea of trying to professionalize more onboarding and more some of the processes within agriculture, and how that could also relate to prevention?
Absolutely. So all of our employees are onboarded with a 3-hour training when they first start here at Perrault Farms. In doing so, we're ensuring that all proper documentation, all paperwork is completed, I-9s are completed, which is important. You need to make sure that there's a lot of liability in being a farmer. There's a lot of regulations, and you want to make sure that you get all of that done beforehand, before they start. And it's a good time to let the employees know what kind of jobs they're going to be doing. Let them know what's expected at work, what their daily week is going to look like, when they're going to have their checks, and so there's no surprises after they begin their employment. We provide sexual harassment training during that. We go through our policies, what's acceptable, and then we go through our policy, sexual harassment, which is defined pretty straightforward on what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in a working environment.
Can you talk about what excites you about this curricular project, this video and worksite curriculum, and why you wanted to champion it?
Absolutely. So this is something that's definitely needed in agriculture. Agriculture is unique in that we're hiring a lot of seasonal employees. So we might have employees working for us for a couple weeks, 2 weeks at a time, or a month. And so having a video like this to show to the crew and just get that training out there, get that word out there, is very important. And letting your employees know that they have a place they can vet any issues with, whether it be somebody in the office, an HR department, someone specific on the team. It's very important because a lot of these issues will come up, and you may not know about them occurring out in the field if you don't have processes for employees to actually report.
And how about policy? What is part of the onboarding? Do you also let your employees know about any policies related to sexual harassment?
We do. We go through our entire sexual harassment policy, which is pretty standard. Any, we take it off. It's a kind of a boilerplate harassment policy. We kind of break it down for them and explain what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And then also we explain the process for them to report it. We have an open door policy in our office. Our office during work hours anyways is always open. They can leave their crew and come to the office to talk to our HR manager at any time during the day with no questions asked by their crew leader or their supervisor. They just need to make sure that they let them know that they're going to go to the office. But we have to have that way that they can actually vet any issues that they have or explain what issues they have. We have an HR manager, Brenda Martinez. She's been working for Perrault Farms for about 3 years now, and she is just doing an outstanding job. She's fluent in Spanish, which is very important because there are some people that there has to be a way that you can communicate and communicate effectively. So yeah, it's imperative that you have someone on your crew that can kind of act as that third party and bring these issues to light. Very important.
What tips do you have for growers? This can be overwhelming in this period of regulation, and it might seem overwhelming, especially for a small grower. What tips and advice do you have in terms of what they can do with their resources on their farm to reduce the likelihood that sexual harassment will happen?
I think it's very important to ensure that there's some checks and balances in place. Instead of having one crew leader that's in charge of all the crews, have multiple crew leaders that can kind of create some checks and balances within your organization. Another thing that I think is very important is continue education with your crew leaders. So just because crew leader A is good at a specific job does not mean that they're going to be a very good crew leader. There's a lot of soft skills that go into being an effective crew leader, and a lot of times those are things that we need to teach and actually bring out in a person. It's not something they're going to automatically know how to do in a situation. So I think training is very important, and we do at Perrault Farms, we invest a lot into training our crew leaders, and whether it be a monthly meeting with them and just kind of going through what are they seeing out in the field. And then also annual training. We actually have a third party come in and train on leadership issues like what we're talking about, how to handle specific issues cordially and respectfully, but still being effective out in the field. So
I know you've also mentioned the importance of hiring supervisors and who you put into these positions of power. The power dynamics really foster things like sexual harassment to happen. Do you have any advice? You mentioned crew leaders. Are there any other tips that you would have for growers when we're thinking about establishing, just in terms of the processes and people that they put in place? Any advice you have about shifting those power dynamics, or tips for hiring supervisors, what you look for?
I think when one is picking crew leaders, farms should be very careful on who they're putting in that position. When crew leader A gives an order or says something to a crew, that order is usually taken as Perrault Farms is saying this or whatever farms is saying this. So you need to be very careful on who you're picking for those positions. And you need to look beyond just work performance in choosing, like I was talked about earlier. Soft skills are very important. Being respectful to their fellow employees, very important. So I think that's something definitely that you can't underestimate, is having those soft skills. Not calling employees by nicknames, calling people by their names, little things like that. It's something I think that is a little bit new to agriculture, but I think definitely it creates efficiencies within the organization.
Have you ever had an experience where you've had to fire a supervisor for any of these sort of reasons that maybe you could provide an example?
Absolutely. So I've had a couple situations. We had a longtime supervisor here that, unbeknownst to us, and we didn't have all these checks and balances in place at the time. And when we did open up an HR department, we started learning more about what was actually going on in the field, and there was some behaviors that were not behaviors conducive to a healthy work environment. So I ended up terminating this longtime supervisor. I've had other scenarios where employees were name calling, simple things like that. But if you have multiple, the first time you give a warning, that should be the end of that problem. If it continues and the problem continues and you're getting complaints about it, then that employee also had to go. So yeah, we've dealt with issues, and I think every farm has their issues at some point. It's just a matter of how you respond to those situations, and you got to make sure that you are providing a safe working environment for the victim. And even if this supervisor's been at your specific business for a long time, it's like a cancer to your business in the long run. So,
can you just talk a little bit about what you like about this particular worksite training project that you've been a champion for?
Absolutely. So agriculture, at this point, we're lacking in a resource to provide effective sexual harassment training, especially to our kind of transient workforce, so to speak. So, we're hiring multiple people on multiple occasions, and this will allow us an ability to provide some training, sexual harassment training, in the employee's language of preference, where they can actually understand and ask questions and really understand the subject matter, which is very important. And this is something that's been established in other industries for quite some time now, and I think it's just kind of new to agriculture in a lot of respects. And I think it's definitely something important that we need to keep working on. There's a lot of stakeholders behind this video. You've got UW. There's various legal services that are involved. There's several groups that are behind this video, and I think that it's definitely going to be a win situation for agriculture.